In this lesson, we'll be looking at variables inside scripts, also arrays inside scripts, and how to manipulate arrays and use the output of certain script actions for consecutive actions. So just to start us off, we have a dashboard with a label and no caption set. To calculate this caption, I'm going to have a set state, but we want to get the value of the new caption from a variable. So first we'll have to create a variable, and to do that you have a setVariable action. Variables need a name and a value. I can now use this variable inside a set state. This is also just a different kind of accessor, but now instead of going state.id.key, we're going to go variable.name of the variable, which in this case is CPT. So now we're doing a set state using the variable value for the caption, which is C123 being the label being set. We can also have multiple variables being set and use multiple variables. So let's do caption A and caption B. And just add a space between them. We see our new caption using both variables. You can even be more complex and use a variable inside a state accessor. So let's add something called my caption, just my CPT. What we can do now is we can set a variable called, let's call it key to look at my CPT. Now we want to access the state, but we don't want to hard code the key. We don't want to say state.self.myCPT. We want to get whatever this key is from a variable to make this more dynamic. So I can go variable.key to look at. So now we have an accessor inside an accessor. First we're injecting this variable, and then after that we're accessing the state. Accessors like these, you don't have to worry that they'll be evaluated in the right way. Opus will make sure that it injects this one first before trying to evaluate this one. So now we'll inject this variable, which is my CPT, in there, and we should see the correct state being logged. What we'll do next is look at arrays as variables. So first off, I'll keep the set state there, we'll use it just now. And I'll have a new set variable, which I'll call my array, and the value will be just an empty array. We can use this as a set state, but if you do it like this, with curly braces, we won't see anything there. But if we did a values inside, let's see what happens now. We see that being logged because it is being stringified for us. But if we do it this way, you'll see the commas are being displayed as well. Not something that's important, just for the purposes of this lesson. We'll be using the set state with the caption in this way. But normally you won't be setting your label captions to any arrays. It's just a nice way for us to debug this during this lesson. So we'll be using this method. So let's start with an empty array again. Now we'll use a new action type called pushArray. The name of the variable I want to push to is myArray, and I want to push just the number 1. This is crashing. Oh, sorry, this should be pushVariable. My bad. PushVariable myArray 1. There we see this one, and of course we can chain these up to do multiple. What you can also do is you can start off with an array you already have available. Let's put one here inside our label. And when we initialize it, we'll actually access the state, curly braces, because it's not a primitive type. So state.self.myArray will be the initial value of this variable. And then we'll push into myArray at the value. Let's make it 4. Now that we know how to create arrays and access arrays, we can get more creative with what we do with them. I'll remove this push array. We can just keep working with this initial array, which we put in the variable over there. Let's do a map array first. So we have an action type available called mapArray, which takes an array and for each value maps it into something else. So the value being the array we want to map. This is variable.myArray, and we specify map to. Let's say we want to map it to an object, and the object should have, let's say, name like this. Now we've mapped this array to something else, but we haven't stored it anywhere. We don't know how to access it yet. It doesn't actually change this array in place. It creates a new array. So many script actions will create a new array or new variable that you need to access. And to access those, you need to put them inside a variable using a new keyword called storeAsVariable. Now we can give this the result of the script action. We can put inside a variable called, let's call it mapped array. So now let's log, or let's put the mapped array inside the caption. And we see we have 3 objects over there. We can also just go and put this into a new state as well. Let's call the new state mapped array so we can go inspect it. So now this label should have a mapped array being set on it, and let's give it the full array, the actual object, the actual array. So open my DevTools over there. And if I go to my DevTools, I look at the label. Let's click on the correct one. There we go. There you see our mapped array, which has 3 objects, all with the name shown inside them. We can, of course, also push to this array in the same way we did previously by doing pushVariable, push another object into this. Now we see we have 5 objects, and looking at the label, we will see our 4th entry in the array. Another way we can work with arrays is using morphIterateArray. So morphIterateArray is kind of like a for loop. It steps over each entry in an array and does something with it. So let's add our morph. The value again, we need to specify which array to work with. And now we specify a chain of actions. This can now be a new action. I'm just going to do a log. And let's just log 1, 2, 3. I'll remove these for now. We can just look at DevTools. So there we see 1, 2, 3 is being logged 3 times, once for each entry inside the array. The last thing we can do with arrays for this lesson is for loop. So we can specify, much like this one, we can specify a for loop action. Now we need to specify a count. Let's do 10, and we specify actions in this instance, which is an array of actions again. There we see our 10 logs. For the map array and your for loop, there are also special variables you can access that relate to the current record that you're on. So in the case of a for loop, we have access to a variable called row number, I believe it is. Just a built-in variable that we get whenever we're inside a for loops actions. And we can go and use this then to do things like creating IDs or just row numbers for any kinds of lists of data or other purposes, of course. Let's add a, so we have our array over there. Let's start this array off empty. So now my array is empty, and let's push to it inside our for loop. So what we can do is I can do my push variable here. And let's push the current row number in. Let's get our set state back for the caption. And let's just make this 2. There we see our 2 elements that we created. I'm row 0 and I'm row 1. We can do something similar for morphIterateArray. Let's start these off again. So let's just start it off as 1, 2, and 3. The value we want to iterate over is variable.myArray. And now we specify a chain instead of actions. And now we can push more elements into it. So for each element inside the array, because we're morphing over it, we're going to push another entry into it. For morphIterateArray, I believe the default variable is called row num, not row number. And let's save this, see what happens. Oh, and now we have a crash happening because we're trying to morph over this array, and for each element we're putting into it, or for each element we're morphing over, we're just inserting another element, meaning that this will crash. Mistake on my part. So instead of pushing it into this one, let's iterate over this one. So we're iterating over my array, but let's push into a new array. New array. So now we can push into new array instead and set the caption to new array. So that we see I'm row 0, I'm row 1, and I'm row 2. 3 entries because we have 3 entries in this array over there. We also have access to something called variable.record when we're working with morphIterateArray, and the record is the element we're on right now. So now we will see instead of seeing I'm row 0, 1, and 2, we'll see the actual values, the actual records inside the array. So we'll see 1, 2, and 3 when I refresh. If these records were objects as well, we could also access keys inside the objects. Let's make 3 of these. Then I can do variable.record.name. See our names being logged. And lastly, when you're working with a mapArray, you can also do something similar. So let's do our setVariable to this one. I'm not going to create a new one. Let's add a mapArray action. The value again being variable.myArray map2. Let's map this to a new object with the key a and the value being variable.row number. And we need to put this inside a new variable because obviously mapArray creates a new array. and we can then use this inside our set state. So now we can go and inspect the result state of our label to make sure it built it properly. These are undefined at the moment. This probably has to be row num, not row number. If you get confused with mapArray and morphIterateArray and for loop, which one of them uses row num and row number, I apologize. Let's go inspect the state again, and we should now see in our results array, we have 0, 1, and 2 inside our objects that were created. Let's also add another kind of variable that mapArray has access to. Just like morphIterateArray, we have something called variable.record, which gives us the entire record that we had over there, which we now just inject into the new object as key B. So there we see each one of these has the entire object inside the key B. Often you'll want to go and debug your variables to make sure your scripts are doing what they need to do. You can do that by opening your reactive tools, scrolling to the top, and then looking for script runner. So this one with a key on it, script runner key, script runner. Inside this, you'll see inside the state there's a variables object, and this will contain all the variables that you've created through scripts that I have run already. So over here we can see there's myArray for the script that was run, and new array, and then you can see all the values, all the variables that were created when your script did run. So if you're wondering why your map array did something strange, you can go inspect your variable.myArray to make sure that variable.myArray actually looked the way you expected it to look. This becomes more complicated when your mapArray or your for loops or your morphIterateArrays have nested objects. Just like in the previous lesson, that becomes a problem. But in the next lesson, we'll discuss script and variable scope and ways for you to work around that.